Alright, is it going?
Yep.
Alright. Hello, I'm Joe. I will be the cameraman, and behind the camera, asking the questions, will be Will and Jacob. And we will be interviewing Kathy Crogan.
Okay, so we want to start off with just like a little bit of background. So can you tell us where you grew up and where you went to elementary school?
Okay, I grew up in the city of Milwaukee. I went to St. Anthony's grade school on the south side and pretty much never left home until I got married. So it was quite a few years.
All right. Do you mind, so what are your earliest memories of like that elementary school and kind of the community around it?
It was very different then than it is today.
Sure.
We left the school to music, but not music that you'd hear on the radio. It was, they played like the Star Spangled Banner and that type of music, and you literally marched silently out of the school, if you could imagine that. So class by class, it was very different. So we had some very strict nuns. That's all I can tell you.
So what's your earliest memory from kind of like your neighborhood growing up, you know, stuff like that?
The neighborhood was a typical neighborhood for those years, which would have been the late 40s, early 50s. Everybody played with everybody, and we had roller skate races down the street, and we stayed out until the street lights came on, and then we knew that was time to go home. And yeah, so it was just a really, it was very idyllic, to say the least, for then. So.
Can you elaborate more on like what you guys used to do when you're outside?
When we were outside, we played kick the can. We played in the alley a lot. We played kick the can and tag and just, you know, typical kid stuff. And everybody played together. We knew all the kids on the block, and yeah, it was a very kind time.
So, like with families on the block, were you close? Were those kind of your friends in the block, or did you make friends in school that were kind of living somewhere else?
We were pretty much friends with everybody on the block. It was really, it was like a big network. You knew, so there was a block, right?
Yeah.
And you knew everybody. All the families knew each other, and the moms were pretty much home every day, all day, so don't mess around because the moms were home pretty much, and they all knew you. So it was a very friendly time, and it was very, my block was very, everybody on it was Polish, so it's just, yeah, so it was a different time.
So you mentioned you went to St. Stanislaus, the Polish.
St. Anthony's was the grade school.
Oh, okay.
Notre Dame and St. Stanislaus, St. Stanislaus was the church that was connected to the high school.
Gotcha. What was your like or middle school or elementary school experiences? Like, what did you guys used to do, or like what were some processes that you used to go through?
Pretty much played tag during recess, kind of thing. We went home for lunch. We didn't stay in school at all. There was no hot lunch in the grade school at all. Everybody was within walking distance of the school, so we didn't drive. Yeah, so different time.
So how was it being taught by nuns? Because I know you mentioned like the nuns that were there, and then all your moms like kind of knew everyone. So like, was there like a very like environmentally like disciplined environment, like just everywhere?
You might say that. I remember there was a nun. She was in charge of the acolytes, and she was about, I'd say maybe at most 4'10", okay? But she was kind of round, and like I say, she was in charge of the acolytes, and she would come up to these kids if they messed up, and she'd grab them by the shirt and give them a talking to. And you didn't mess with the nuns at the school. That's all. The majority of them were super strict. So, in a good way.
Yeah. So did religion play a part in like your neighborhood in the school, or was it kind of not so much of an important factor?
Religion was real big in the neighborhood. I would say that 3/4 of the block was a practicing Catholic. Went to church Sundays, and we dressed up. That was the other thing too. You know, you see sometimes people, Easter, everybody's kind of in church and dressed real fine and all that stuff. That's how we dressed every Sunday, you know. And the dads wore hats, and yeah, it was a very dressy thing. Yes.
What did you guys used to do after church?
And Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
we went home, and my mother made the big meal of the day, which the big meal of the day was at noon instead of in the evening. So, yeah.
Did you spend much time in like the city of Milwaukee, or did you mostly stay in your neighborhood?
For grade school, we pretty much stayed in the neighborhood because we had everything within walking distance. The grocery store was 3 or 4 blocks in one direction. The butcher shop where we bought all our meat products was right on the corner. And the milk was delivered to our house in the milk chute, which I think you have heard about.
Yeah.
And yeah, you didn't have to go very far. And a lot of stuff was, I remember there was a man that came through, I don't remember how often, maybe once every couple weeks, and he had a horse-drawn wagon, believe it or not. I don't feel that old until I say that stuff. He had a horse-drawn wagon, and it was produce, and he must have come from a farm and brought, you know, a lot of produce. My dad would go to the farmer's market because there were 7 of us in the house, a lot of mouths to feed. He would go to the farmer's market on the weekend, and he would buy huge sacks, like of corn on the cob and stuff like that in the summer. And then the moms put up a lot of it for the winter. And we had a real strict Monsignor in charge of our church and school. And he was an iron fist leader, okay? And the nuns were scared to death of him. So, and the nuns scared the kids to death, but he scared them. So anyway, my dad would basically sneak sacks of food into the nuns. Like he would bring them a sack of corn on the cob, or, you know, different things like that. And they were just like, oh, they were so excited to see him. And he had to bring it in fast and drop it off. So it's an interesting time.
Yeah. I noticed in the pre-interview it said you had chickens in your backyard.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was that a common thing, or you want to tell us a little bit more?
I think we were the only house on the block that had chickens. But it was definitely a common thing for my grandpa. My grandpa was the one that had the chickens and the chicken coop, and he sold the eggs, and he slaughtered the chicken in the basement. And I remember one time he would not let any of us kids, there were 4 of us in the house, don't come downstairs right now, Grandpa's busy. Okay, well, he was chasing a chicken in the basement. And I remember one time, I was the one that tested situations. And it was like, well, what's he doing down there? And I went down, and it was like, oh my God. I only did that once. And it was, but anyway, we did have chickens. We had fresh chicken on occasion, so.
Did you guys have you ever got close to a chicken and like something just ever happened to it, like it just kind of disappeared?
I don't know what you mean by disappeared. Like somebody
You
would.
came in a relationship with a chicken.
Oh, that way. No, you know, my grandfather, again, like I said, he was in charge of the chickens, and he would let us go in and collect the eggs, and he would let us go in and spread the feed, and then you were out of there. There was just, no, to make a pet, no, or, you know, to get close to one of them, no, not at all. I did, again, tempted fate, I did want to see what would happen if you shook the fence. And so I went up to the chicken fence, and I remember one day that I went up to the fence. I must have been 8 years old, so you chalk it up to being dumb and young. And I went in and I shook the fence, and they flew up, and just feathers everywhere, and nobody saw me do it, and I never owned up to it, but the hens stopped laying for about 3 or 4 7 So anyway, it was quite an experience. It really was. It's a fun memory.
What was one of the other things that you used to do with your grandfather?
Oh man, we just went for walks with him. He had a cane, and he walked kind of slow, and he liked telling stories about things that happened to him when he was younger, and that was kind of that was how you learned about your ancestors and the stories and stuff like that. He was a neat guy. He really was.
Was there any like very specific boundary in like your past that you tested that you wish that you didn't?
For me personally, probably won't go there. Many times, yes. There were many situations in my life that I tested boundaries. I'll just say that.
So what did you guys do, like, I mean, outside of like grade school, like kind of any time in your life, like what was your go-to like entertainment, like it's like a Friday night, and you know, like what was your go-to? Like,
Well, again, you could walk anywhere, anything you wanted. There were 3 movie theaters within walking distance of my house. So it was like, pick a movie, which one do you want to go to? And there was a popcorn shop right next to one of the theaters, which was just, I still remember it as being, memory has probably distorted how good that popcorn was, but it really was, it was a fun time. It really was. Inexpensive, and we had ushers in the theater, if you can imagine that. So it was just fun stuff.
So, like in terms of like going into the city of Milwaukee, like I know you said like you walked, but like so did you ever venture into the city like as like a day trip or go down to the lake or anything like that?
We did. That was a family thing. If you go to the lakefront, I can't remember. There was an area that was just grass, okay? And we would go there on a Sunday, and we would make a barbecue or have a picnic or something like that. And I remember that there were no parking lots down at the lakefront, and we would, my dad said, okay, you girls get out of the car and block that parking place. And the 3 of us would stand where the parking spot was, and nobody could park there until my dad turned the car around and brought the car there. So, but those were really fun times, you know. And so we did go down to the lakefront as a family.
So like more into high school, how was your high school experience? Like, would you say it was good?
Oh, I had one of the best. I really did. I had I was not, it's funny because I've told the kids this story. I wanted to be in the choir, but you had to try out for the choir. And I just, okay, as old as I am, I remember this, and it just makes me almost want to laugh out loud because I tried out for the choir, and I remember this nun said to me, "Thanks for coming, but I think you should go down to the basement. The nun in charge of the newspaper is looking for people." She was telling me probably not material for the choir. And it wound up being the best decision in the world because I found that I absolutely loved writing stories and writing headlines. It was different then, obviously, than it is now. And I wound up being a co-editor on the paper and literally just inspired me for writing. I really loved it. So, yeah, I can't write a short paragraph. You know, when you guys do texting, my texts are like, ta, 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 ta. They get very chatty. So anyway, yeah.
So do you remember anything like that was written in the school paper, or like anything about the school paper?
We did stories on, like, we didn't have a lot of clubs then. I remember we had Future Teachers of America, which was a pretty active club. And we had the sports stuff and the Sodality, which was the Marion group. There wasn't a lot going on, but if I look at it correctly, by today's standards, those stories would be considered trivia. But that was all we had, and it wasn't a big newspaper. It was only 4 pages. So, but it was fun.
How did the school newspaper work? Because now we don't really have that anymore. So what would you do, or what was the process of getting a newspaper or just even publishing it?
Oh, well, you have to have a teacher that enjoys journalism and enjoys working with kids, which this teacher did, and is very patient, because we had a lot of people who were writing stories about, something that went on in a classroom, or something an achievement that somebody had outside of the school. Kids were in dance groups or that kind of thing, and maybe competed in something, and so that's the kind of stuff that wound up in the paper. But a lot of this, we did a lot of pictures that wound up in the paper with a story, and so you'd be surprised at how many features are going on around you, that kids are involved in things that you don't realize outside of the school, and so that's what we picked on pretty often, was the stuff that went on outside the school, and then the things that the team won, and or whatever. Yeah. Yes.
Do you have a specific article that you wrote that was your favorite, or that you're most proud of?
One specific one? No. We wrote stories about absolutely everything that was going on in the school. The church was very active at the time, the St. Stanislaus Church that was attached to the school. And so we did wind up doing stories about that. And the pastor of that church, if you drive down, what is that, 43? Do you know? I'm not sure what. Do you know the church that has the 2 domes, that has the 2 spirals? That's St. Stan's.
I think that is 43.
It's 43. I think it is 43. Sure. And the domes were gilded in gold, legitimately gilded in gold. So, and with time, the gold wore off, and it was kind of sad, but it was beautiful for its time. So,
was there ever an article that you kind of didn't want to write, but you had to anyway, or did you just enjoy the whole entire thing?
Oh, I enjoyed the whole thing. Yeah, there was always. To me, it was interesting finding out the story behind the story. It was the teacher would say, "Okay, you're going to write this one. You're going to write this one, and then because I was an editor, I wound up correcting a lot of the stories for English, and we didn't have autocorrect, so you had to do it manually, and it was because of that. It was a different deal. So So I did a lot of the headlines. That's another thing too. We had to count. Okay, an M takes up, let's just say an M was four count, and an I would be 1. So you had to count what the count was for what was going to be the headline. So, and again, we had nuns and very strict.
So I know like the environment here is kind of different with like teachers versus nuns, but for nuns, did they, like for instance, like dating in high school, did they interfere or not, did they pry much?
Oh
or
my gosh.
were they more like,
Okay, yes. True story. So like for prom, okay, you have your big fancy dress, and if the nun who was in charge of, you had to go past the nun to get into the dance. If you came in and she perceived that the neckline on your dress was too low, I'm serious, they had tulle, which is a cloth, and she would stick a piece of tulle in the top of your dress. So it was a different time.
that's funny. So, could you tell us more about your dad? Because I know he was an engineer and all that.
Yeah.
Like, where did
Yeah.
he work and all that?
He worked at Squirty. He was what they call a model maker. The engineer would have an idea. He would create it on paper, and then he would give the paper to my dad, and my dad would make it. He would take the drawing and everything and the specifications and create it. And interesting, my dad loved, now this is going back, I'm trying to think, like 20s, okay? He loved airplanes, so he was really ahead of his time. And but he was very smart. As a matter of fact, when I was in high school, I struggled with math, and I asked him for help with. I remember I asked him for help with algebra, and what was the next one? What comes after? Geometry. I asked him for help with algebra and geometry because I was struggling, and he sat down next to me, and he was always willing to help, right? And he said, you know what, I can't help you with this. It was too simple for him. His mind was, he was in the upper math group.
Yeah.
So anyway, and the story about my dad is Second World War, he signed up for the Coast Guard, and he was active in the Coast Guard, and the government pulled him back out of the Coast Guard and put him back doing the creating from the drawings, because what he wound up doing is he wound up working on some things that were military related. So he's a cool guy and nice. Oh my gosh, you would just have loved him. He was, I guess that's where I get my patience. Nobody ever said that about me, but he was so patient and just the nicest guy.
Did you ever help your dad with like a project or something that he was building?
Oh gosh. Well, I wanted to be his right hand, okay? So when he would be doing the home repairs and stuff like that, the plumbing or whatever, I was that one kid that was right next to him, and he'd say, give me this wrench or whatever. And so I learned a lot from him just by being that person that was next to him. So, yeah. But other than that, no, he could. I mean, what he was doing was way over my head. Yeah, he had the tools that he had were extremely sophisticated for taking measurements and things like that. I mean, he wasn't doing an eighth of an inch. He was doing even finer measurements than that. So it was pretty amazing stuff.
So, for like outside or graduating from high school, in the pre-interview, you said like it was the limited, like the options for women were kind of limited in that. So like, where did you find yourself? Like
In
after high
trouble?
school? No, like.
No, I'm serious.
Oh.
No, this was I was ahead of my time, and I was a kid that was going to always be swimming upstream, you know, and women in the very early 60s, you could be a teacher or a nurse to go to college. Anything other than that, you were thinking way outside the box, and that was not encouraged. And I remember that being the person that did things a little bit different, it never dawned on me that teaching and that, you know, it was just, I wanted to go into what was called at that time, it was called personnel. Today it's called HR, human resources. And so I was in those classes, and the instructor was not happy that a female was in this class, and the rest of the students in the class were not happy that a female thought she could be in this class. And I just felt there was a little, it wasn't smooth. So I enjoyed the psychology classes, and I enjoyed the personnel classes, but I realized that they weren't welcoming me with open arms. So,
So where did you go to college?
Marquette.
Oh, okay.
I was working there. I was working at Marquette and going to school part-time at night, which was really a challenge. It really was. I was working in the education department.
Okay. Did you make any like close friends while you're in college? That's kind of like, that was still with you past college?
Oh, you know, I made some really wonderful friends in college, and I was just thinking about that the other day, and we didn't have I envy you kids because you're able to keep touch with all of these friends, and we have drifted apart because you wind up, I have a friend that's in Utah, another friend that's in California. As a matter of fact, one of my dearest friends is in California. We try to keep touch, but it isn't as easy. It's much easier to lose track of people from those years for me.
How did you make those friends? Like, how did your friendship like become?
Well, some of the friendships were formed by, like the people that I worked with during the day. Those were friendships that were fairly easily formed because we may not have been in the same office, but we were on the same level. And then there was, I would often get to the union, which is, you know what the union is? Yeah. Okay. I would often get to the union before my class, and you wind up seeing the same people all the time. And, you know, somebody would say, okay, if I sit with you, and then you know, and before you know it, that's how, it was easy sliding into friendships.
So, like, at Marquette, like, what, I know I guess you didn't have too much time for, like, recreation between, like, a job and night school, so.
No.
Did you find anything that you, liked doing in Milwaukee, or was it pretty limited?
I enjoyed the social scene. I did. There was, I'm trying to think how some of the people that we hung around with, the groups grew. It's like this group had a bunch of friends that kind of overlapped into this group, and that, you know, one group led to another, and I guess that's how the social groups grew. So, yeah.
Since you had very limited free times and you had how did you kind of unwind or like find yourself relaxing in like those short like periods you had to actually see yourself?
There were places of music and entertainment in the evening, and we would go Friday nights or Saturday night or something like that. And we would hit the bars. Just plain and simple. I was trying to find a way to say that without saying it. That we did that, yeah.
So, if we go back to your childhood a little bit, and I guess into a little bit of adulthood, so you mentioned you did Girl Scouts a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, what was that like? Was it any different than how it is now, if you know anything about how it is?
It was, to a great extent, it was very much the same. It was harder to find places to have your meetings because churches didn't open up their recreation area to you. So, yeah. So it was fun, though. I really enjoyed it. We didn't do camping the way they do now, and it was very much more structured. So, yeah, very different, though. I mean, if I really think about it, there were some things that we did that I don't think they would be able to do today. Let's just put it that way. I don't, yeah, but it was a very positive experience because I was a Girl Scout. My mother was the leader, and then I became a leader. So it was great stuff along the way.
Were there any like people in colleges or people in college or like teachers in college that really like supported you or helped you get through that time?
College professors? No. I would have to say there was not a single professor that was really somebody that I would remember forever. I remember them. I remember I had a history, I loved history, and I had a professor, and now I can't remember his name, but I can see him because he was not a whole heck of a lot taller than me, and that I can say that doesn't happen real often. And this guy was so old, but he loved history. He made it interesting. So he left an impression, but obviously not good enough because I can't remember his name.
So how did you like see the women's rights movement like kind of evolve in your lifetime?
Boy, that's a good one. I don't know that, I don't know that I was totally aware of the evolution of women's rights so much because by the time that was going on, I had a family, and I really, I didn't have time to be, now, empower my daughter? Yes, definitely. And grandkids? Yes, definitely. But it really wasn't an issue for me when I was a homemaker or working or, out in the world,
Gotcha.
No.
So do you have any like specific memories about the civil rights movement at all?
Yes, I do. There was a point in 67 and 68 where I think that was the beginning of trying to make a change for blacks, okay? And there was serious, what they called redlining. Do you know what that is? Yep. Okay. There was serious redlining in the city, and there was Father Grappi, who was leading the demonstrations to change a lot of the negative parts that were going on. And there were 200 days of demonstrations. Yep. The majority of them were legitimately demonstrations only. They were not, there was very little that people that were hurt or destruction of property or anything like that. But I remember it, and the reason it just is like, to me, this is like it happened yesterday. my sister and I were downtown. We had gone Christmas shopping, and my fiance was supposed to pick us up, and we were waiting for him in a small hamburger joint, okay? And he wasn't coming, and he wasn't coming, and why wasn't he coming? Why was he so late? And I remember stepping outside the restaurant and looking down Wisconsin Avenue, and what the heck, all the lights are out at the other end of Wisconsin. And then I realized, wait, it looks like the lights are moving. And what it was people from one sidewalk to the other, all the way across the road, that were marching down the street. And the reason my fiance wasn't there was he was on the south side of the march, and we were on the north side of the activity. And so they were not letting any cars get through. And so we were kind of sitting there. And I remember being very scared because they're marching past the window and basically looking in and marching and marching, and it just seemed like it took forever.
Yeah.
And that would have, I mean, it was a reality, and you read about it, but again, we didn't have the media that you have today. Today, you can open your phone and you can find out what's going on in McWanago, you can find out what's Madison or Washington, D.C. You get it right away. It wasn't until the Vietnam War that we started getting more news that was news. So anyway, how are we doing?
Oh, good. Yeah.
All right, okay.
How did you meet your fiance? How did you meet your fiance at the time?
Okay,
Husband.
my
At
husband.
that time.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was. I only had one. We met at a Christmas party in August at a lake cottage, and I didn't like him real much because he was very silly and very funny, and yeah. So it didn't start out real good, but by Christmas time we were pretty good friends, and one thing led to another. So, but it was the Christmas party in August that is just, it was very memorable. So, complete with a Christmas tree. I don't know where they got the Christmas tree. I think I do, but I won't mention it.
How did your relationship grow closer, though?
With him, we just, we both had the same crazy sense of humor. I think that was the thing that started us, is that I remember that one of our first dates was we had met in August. By December we were dating, and I remember we were all dressed up. We had been to a real fancy formal thing, and I was in high heels and the whole thing. We had a snowball fight in the parking lot, and it was just like, and it never occurred to me that was silly, or it was just like he started it, I kept it going, and so anyway, that was our deal. Is that we often talked about the fact that when we started dating, every time we went out, we wound up laughing seriously over something. So it was he had a good sense of humor, and my son is very much cut from the same cloth as him. So.
Oh, it's okay. Where were you guys' first date?
Our first date was to I'm pretty sure that we went to, he was a Marine, and we went to the Marine Corps ball. Very, very fancy. And I remember, I think I gave my mother a few gray hair because I was sewing my party dress, and my date was coming in the door, and I wasn't quite finished with it. And she was, yeah, I did that on more than one occasion. So,
So I know you mentioned Vietnam, and your husband was a Marine. So did that ever overlap, or?
It was not a good scenario. Yeah, he was scheduled to. This was just before I met him, or before we started dating. He was scheduled to. He was in California for 2 weeks They did basic training, and he was scheduled to be shipped out to Vietnam. And they were loaded onto a boat, and he and his battalion, or whatever, I don't know what the number is, I think it's battalion, they were sitting in the bottom of the boat and scared to death, and he said it was so quiet that they knew where they were going, they knew it was bad, and they were sitting there. Oh. Okay, this makes me, I don't want to embarrass myself here. So they were sitting and waiting for the boat to go. And he said that the man in charge, the general or whatever that is, came in and said, okay, you guys, get your gear, come on. And they're like, what the heck? And they got their gear and they marched off the boat. And as they're marching off the boat, they realized, oh.
You want to take a break?
No, I'm okay. I'm just going to swallow hard. The men that were coming in happened to be an all-black unit. And Ken, my husband, found out at a later point in time that wherever they shipped them to Vietnam, 3/4 of the men died. So he might never have come home. So my legacy with him might never have happened. So, but that makes me very emotional to realize how close he came to being there, being one of them, and it makes me to a certain degree angry that it was a black unit that replaced them. So it was not a good time. His experience, it was an eye-opening experience, because when he went from Wisconsin really wasn't outside of, now I won't say outside of, there were other issues, but Wisconsin was not, in the early 60s, was not as heavily prejudiced as down south, sure. Right? And he was on a bus when he was going to boot camp, and he said it was an education because not everyone sat with everyone on the bus, because certain folks had to sit at the back of the bus, and it was awful. But he didn't realize, he just thought, oh, they don't want to sit with us, kind of thing. And then they stopped at a cafe to get food when they were on their way down, and he was walking in, and the man behind him, who was a Southerner, grabbed him by the shirt and yanked him back, and he's like, what the hell? What are you doing? And what it was, he was going in the wrong entrance, and he was not prepared for the fact that he couldn't sit with the buddy that he was a friend to. So yeah, it was an education, and it was not a good one.
So did those lessons come a little bit later in life? Because did you notice any segregation when you were younger at all, or?
I didn't notice it up here, but I was telling my grandson that to a certain degree I lived in a segregated neighborhood, because this was Polish neighborhood, and if you were German, you were not going to move into this neighborhood. It wasn't as serious as segregation when it comes to color. I don't mean to minimize it, but this was Polish, this was German, there was an Italian, and it was just Irish. You stayed with people you were comfortable. We stayed with the SKIs. So, not that ours didn't. Everybody would say, your name doesn't end in SKI. Yeah, right. Okay. But anyway, yeah, it was, different time. Sure.
So, for your job, what was your first job like? I know you said you worked at Marquette, but your first kind of real job.
That was a real job. I worked in the education department full time, and I remember it because I worked with these professors, and I did statistics for them. I made the statistic charts, and you did it. You didn't have a computer that did it. You were doing it manually, which was much harder on the eyes and on your brain. I mean, it was tough stuff, but it was fun. The education professors there were just as different as your teachers here. They were, soup to nuts. So anyway, so that was my first real full-time job. And then I went to work at the gas company, which was interesting as well. We had nothing to do with the flame. We just did, our department kept track of all the vehicles and equipment. So it was lots of boring statistics stuff. I wound up being in those jobs, and it was like, I don't like doing this. So anyway, and then I went to work with my husband, and we ran an insurance agency for over 30 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was fun. That was interesting. That was really interesting. So.
Was that based out of Milwaukee or?
The insurance thing?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we were in the Hales Corners area.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Can you tell us one of your, no, not one of them. Can you tell us a few of your favorite college experiences, or things that you really, that you just think of and it just brings happiness or joy to you?
Well, I have an inappropriate one, so it is what it is. I would eat lunch because the staff, we were all staff in different places, would be together, all right? And I would bring my lunch over to the admissions office, which was closed for lunch hour. And I have an inappropriate sense of humor. I've always had it. It's just it served me well.
Sure.
So we were having lunch, and I ate lunch with these women for a very long, forever,
Yeah.
right? And some of my best friends, the women that I traveled with, were in the admissions office, which is how I wound up going over there. And I still remember this as like it happened recently. So we're having lunch, and we would have a little music or something in the background.
Sure.
Or whatever. And I remember that there was a song which you probably have never heard. It was called "The Stripper," okay? And it was kind of music that would be played at a stripper place, okay? And I was being funny, and I was doing with my coat, and we were laughing, and then people in front of me stopped laughing, and it was like, oh God. And I turned around, and the admissions director, who was never in there at lunchtime, had walked in behind me, and he wasn't smiling. He wasn't. And then the next day my friend said, yeah, he said you can't come to lunch anymore. So I was done with that. But it was just, yeah. So that's one of my fun memories from working at Marquette, was getting in trouble.
Yeah. So I know you moved out to Hales Corners with your insurance company. So did you have a good idea of a good sense of Milwaukee expanding into kind of what kind of a city it is now, or?
Oh boy, it was growing. I'll tell you, my husband worked in the Muskego area, and I just think this is really kind of interesting because when he would visit his customers, he would always come back with eggs because it was so much farmland. And I remember the addresses because I was the one that did the paper stuff at the office. And so anyway, he would bring back eggs for everybody. And now I've driven granddaughters to swimming at Muskego High School, and it's like I'm going past these streets, and it's like, I know that street. I used to write that down, and now it's all homes and subdivisions, and it has the sprawl. It's growing and growing and growing. yeah. So it all changes. Now it's like condominiums are everywhere.
Yeah.
Especially in Tulsa.
As you was growing up in Milwaukee, or what were things that you realized that were changing in like within the city, and then, yeah.
You know, the downtown area, I could tell that the downtown area was changing. It at one point it was like the classy place to go was to go downtown, and restaurants and the theaters and whatever, and little by little it deteriorated, and you could tell that it was not. It had just changed little by little, and you don't realize when those changes are happening. I think we were aware of it, but there's nothing you can do, and like everyone else, it's the parking. There were no parking structures. It was all street parking way back in the day, and now parking structures are everywhere. So yeah.
How was the move from Milwaukee to Greendale? What were some like big changes that you realized that weren't similar, that weren't very in Milwaukee but were in Greendale?
I don't know that we were ever. I don't think we made a conscious decision, we're moving out of Milwaukee. I think we were just looking for a certain kind of house in a certain kind of neighborhood, and we happened to find one in Greendale, and that's how we wound up in Greendale. We just kind of slid peacefully into the community, and it is to this day a really nice community.
You notice any differences from your old neighborhood to the one in Greendale?
Oh, it is now. Oh my gosh, true story. I have a dear friend who lives in California, and I thought, what would be really nice would be, I'm going to take a picture of her house. We lived 3 blocks south of Mitchell Street on 9th Street, okay? And I thought, this would be really fun. I'll send her a picture of my house and her house. And so I took a picture of her house, and I didn't get out of my car, rolled down the window, took the picture of her house, and then I went up to my house, and it made me kind of sad because it had changed so much. It really had changed dramatically from when I was a kid. Not in a, it just had changed. And so I'm getting ready to take the picture, how the neighborhoods change, right? This neighborhood was wonderful, safe, whatever. So I'm getting ready to take the picture of the house that I grew up in. And I realized out of the corner of my eye that 2 doors down from my house, on the porch, are 3 men, I would say middle-aged men. A couple of them they were drinking out of paper bags. And the one man who didn't look real happy was getting off the porch, and he was walking toward me in my car. And I thought, I'm not taking that picture, I'm out of here. And so, yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question, but it has changed dramatically from when I grew up. Yeah. So evolution.
Speaking of evolution, did you ever notice like freeway construction, was that happening at all?
Freeways were non-existent.
Yeah.
Obviously, that many years ago. And I remember when they cleared out one section of the expressway, and they tore down miles of homes, and then they didn't build the expressway. And I always felt bad about that. It's like, who plans this stuff that you don't plan ahead? You took all those people's home, and the expressway never went through. So. But now, it's pretty amazing for how you can go anywhere in and around Milwaukee and find expressway, and yeah.
How many people did you observe, on the road when the expressway just came up compared to like now?
Well, there's, the thing is, it's like, how many people do you know that have only got 2 cars in the, I mean, it's like so many homes, they're 3-car family. And those 3 cars are on the road. It was a very different time. I remember when I was learning how to drive, my dad did not like my stops. He was my instructor, and he said, you can't keep going through on the yellow. You got to stop. Okay. I guess I was calling it too close or something. I don't know. And I remember one time, so he had been lecturing me about this, and we were coming to a stop sign, and I mean, I was like right there, and the light was changing, and I remember slamming on the brakes, and I almost put my dad through the windshield because he said, yeah, you could have gone through on that one. It's like, well, I can't have it both ways. So it's interesting driving then and now. I mean, it just.
The astronaut landing. Did you see that on TV? And like, how were you just amazed, or were you a part of the few that like believed that it's not possible?
I believed it, and I believed it, and I was really impressed by our outer space efforts until I was watching live one day, and when the spaceship exploded, and that was just, I can still remember that, and it just is something I'll never forget. There's certain things I will never forget. I remember my husband was at a meeting in Brookfield, a business meeting, and I was in the office, and he calls. He never called when he was at a business meeting, and he goes, we had a TV in the office. He said, turn the TV on, something's going on. And I'm like, what? And he repeated, turn the TV on, something's going on. And I again said, what are you talking about? Just do it. So I thought, what the heck, right? And it was 9/11. So I'm sitting there, and it's like, what happened to that building? I mean, now you know what happened. I'm sitting there watching it live, and I'm thinking, what just happened? I mean, literally, I can remember thinking, wait, what just happened? What am I watching? I mean, and then I'm watching, what is that stuff falling out of the building? Well, it turned out it was people who were jumping for their life because they were going to go out instead of being burned alive. So I wish I hadn't seen all that stuff live. Because I wish I had known about it after, because then you can filter how much you watch or don't watch. But I was sitting there watching that live both times. So I'm still impressed by space travel. I really am. I don't know if I'd want to go to Mars, though. Who takes so long to get there, number one? You're an old person by the time you get there, so.
So for like new technology, kind of like evolving, when did you like find yourself like kind of taking apart and like maybe your first like cell phone or anything like that?
Oh my gosh. Our first cell phone was about as big as a box of Kleenex. I'm serious. Yeah, they were, I am amazed. I am just phenomenally impressed with, I don't feel old, but then I start thinking, wait, we didn't have a TV. We didn't have a car when I was a kid. So then there was a microwave, and then there's a computer, and the size of the computers at first were just like, I mean, if you think about it, it's like if a business had computers, it was a room. They were huge, and now you have this little, it's like next to nothing. So I mean, I can't imagine for you guys what is technology going to, what things are you going to see that are going to be changed or different? My first airplane flight was on a airplane that was a prop jet. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, it was like, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then you go, 10 years later, it's like, whew, you're on a jet. So, I mean, I have seen a lot of changes. And I hated when my grandmother would go through, oh, I've seen a lot. And it's like, yeah, now I'm that one, so, yeah, you see a lot.
What was your reaction to having your first TV, actually?
Oh my God. One channel, you watched what was on there, whatever it was. If it was Lawrence Welk, ooh, and it was just, but you couldn't select from anything. That was it. We thought we were so cool. And it was about this big around. And it was round. So, yeah. And we didn't have it right away. I mean, it was, people in those times, it would be like, again, friendly people, neighborhood, the whole thing. That one neighbor that would get a TV, come on over and watch. And we did, It was just, I don't know, it was cool. We were cool when we got one, though.
Was that like the only kind of technology that you noticed like change your neighborhood, or were there other things that kind of sprung about when you were growing up, or even a little later that kind of took a hold like in your life?
You mean
like any new like technology, like I don't know, like your phone?
Well, how about washing machines and dryers? I mean, I remember my mother broke her leg at a picnic. And so somebody had to hang the laundry. And so I was the one that went out there. I was dragging a chair because I wasn't tall enough to reach the line. And I remember this makes me smile because I remember a neighbor 2 doors down came over and she said, "You look like you could use some help hanging the laundry." And I said to her, how did you know something was wrong? And I remember her saying, "Are you kidding?" I guess I wasn't doing a real good job. So, yeah. But, I mean, if you really think about it, we had a wringer washer, which meant that you had to squeeze the water out. It was just, and no dryer. You dried outdoors, whether it was in the middle of winter or in the middle of winter, my mother would hang clothes in the basement if it was a real cold spell or lots of snow or whatever. So I did walk to school.
You want to talk about those experiences of you walking to school? Like, how did it feel to just walk to school every now and then?
You didn't have a choice, so you did it. My deal was that I could never get to school on time. I could not get to school on time. And I was so bad that I remember in my senior year, I had my senior homeroom could watch the alley that I would come down, right? And I found out at a later point in time that the young men in my class they had a little, they would bet on what time I would actually get into the classroom, kind of like, she's going to be here at 8:02, no, 8:03, and it was just so, yeah, it was, but I walked through, we didn't have snow days. Is that a thing of the current? We didn't have, and we had freaking snow, let me tell you. We had snow piles, and yeah, and people didn't clear their sidewalks, so sometimes you walked in the road, and it was not a pleasant walk in the wintertime. So.
What was your reaction to having since we now have refrigerators that can dispense water?
Oh my
have,
gosh.
Dispense ice. What was your reaction when you figured out about stuff like that?
Awesome. And that was just a wonderful, again, wonderful. We went from, we had an ice box where the guy delivered ice, and we put the ice in the refrigerator or whatever, and then And then we went to, first class, we got a refrigerator, right? And it was electric. And then to go to having a refrigerator that dispenses water and ice was just like, wow. It's just cool. It is cool. You know, and the thing is, there's so many things like that you stop thinking about it, you know? You just take it for granted. I would love to see, that would be an interesting thing to do, would be, just like you said, the water and ice, microwave, or, you know, my son's house, they have like 3 or 4 TVs, you know? And we were so excited because we had one and we could have one, you know, just the programs. And then it was shut off at noon. I mean, at midnight. At midnight it ended and you got a picture on the screen until it came back on in the morning. So.
What is one of your favorite memories of you and your husband?
Oh, we had so many.
But just you can give us as many as you want to.
Oh. He liked to be, I hope no children will see this, he liked to be Santa Claus. He was the best Santa Claus. Okay? Now, and this is a funny story because it will tell you a lot about him and the person he was. Okay? You would never have known that it was him because he had a really great beard, you know, and he was really decked out perfectly. And he wore white gloves and he wore boots, okay? So my nephew, who is now, what is he? He's now 52 years old, told this story when he remembered this at my husband's funeral, all right? So this left an impression for him. So he was about 4, okay. And he was sitting on Santa's lap and they were having a conversation and my husband could engage these kids. He was a natural, all right, as far as having a conversation and what, you know, and getting the kid into the conversation and the whole thing. So anyway, so my nephew is sitting on his lap, he's 4 years old, and they're having this conversation. And kids get inquisitive about odd things, right? And so my nephew looks down at Ken's feet and goes, "Wait, why are you wearing boots?" And Ken says, "Oh," now this should have thrown him for a loop, right? He said, "Well, it's the reindeer poop." And so my nephew, who was 4 at the time, remembered that 30 years later when my husband passed. We had an Irish wake for my husband when he passed away, which an Irish wake is a party. And everybody, you tell stories about the person that has passed away, funny stories,
Yeah.
you know. So it's a good time. It leaves you not crying. So.
You know, as like we evolve in technology and stuff like that, are there any things that you just miss from like the past or like from things that you just were growing up that completely changed now?
Oh gosh. I don't know if I miss the fact that everything was so close that there was no need to walk more than 5 or 6 blocks from your house because it was all there, you know? I mean, the drugstore, the meat store, the grocery store, the movie theater, the church, it was all within walking distance, legitimate walking distance. And I really like that I think that made for a closer. I think people today, you're so busy, and I don't care how close or how far apart the houses are. I think there's a bigger distance between people. There are some people that don't know their neighbors because they're never home, you know. So I think that part of it is something I miss, is that closeness, the comfort. But I'm happy where we are today. I just think it's pretty awesome.
Is your neighborhood like as close to each other as you were in the past, or is it kind of different?
Where I live now?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We were just talking about this the other day. I'm in my house 50 years. Okay. I have a dear friend who is a couple doors down. She's in her house 60 some years. So it's just, the people come. It's a nice, we have a really nice, friendly neighborhood. And to a great extent, it's not as perfect as it used to be. We used to have some crazy block parties, but it's a real friendly neighborhood, and people watch out for each other. It's interesting because we talked about this. Our houses are back to back. There's a grassy area in between the backs of the houses. Yeah, and I'll get a phone call from somebody that has said, if my shades aren't up by a certain time in the day, so are you okay? Is everything okay? And it's like it isn't nosy. It's like they're watching out for everybody. They're watching out for each other. So there's a lot of that on the block. As a matter of fact, we have over the years we've had male people, mailmen. I hate male person, whatever it's called, that would say, one year I went on vacation and forgot to cancel my mail, so my mail was accumulating, and the mailman basically was alerting all the neighbors. He was like, "Where's Kathy? Her mail is accumulating," and then they said, "Oh, don't worry, she's on vacation." But that's the kind of neighborhood I live in right now, is that it's friendly and people look out for each other, and we know if somebody's sick, and we know, pretty much. Now there are a few that have moved onto the block that want to keep their distance, but everybody else is pretty friendly.
As your husband came back from, the war and stuff like that, how was your reunion? Like, you being reunited with him, basically.
We were so freaking happy because when he finally got out, there was a lot of joy. There was a lot of, it's interesting because Vietnam, like I said, was going on. We were extremely, extremely happy that he was back and that he was done. But part of us was, there are so many men, women that are still there that might not come back. And it was like you were happy for yourself, but in the back of your mind, it was like you couldn't be crazy party because you knew that there was sadness that's in other people's homes.
As you can tell, since electronics and everything in technology continuously is evolving, is there anything that you're happy that is changing? How pollution was increasing. Are you happy that we're now going towards cleaner forms of energy, or cleaner forms of transportation and stuff like that?
I'm not sure if, I think some of the things that are changing are good, but I think I would like to see us be more self-sustaining, and I don't think we're necessarily moving in that direction right now, and that's a problem for me anyway. I wish that was different.
Is there anything about Milwaukee specifically that you saw change that maybe you didn't like the interstates? I know you mentioned, but was there anything else
Changes in the city of Milwaukee?
I mean, yeah, I guess Milwaukee, the people of Milwaukee, anything really.
Oh, I think people are more rude today. Okay, and I'll give you an example. Several years ago, I was on crutches, okay, And have you ever been on crutches? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes?
I broke my arm, but not crutches.
Okay, no crutches, right?
You have?
No crutches?
Yeah, no crutches.
Okay, it's an education, all right? Because you're at the mercy of people around you, you know? And it's like, that was an education that I could have done without, because I remember I was walking down a sidewalk on my crutches and not doing all that well, and a man was coming toward me. He gave me no room to go past him, and I remember it to this day. And what happened was my one crutch slipped off the sidewalk into a little garden area that was on the side, and it was soft, and so the right crutch was on the verge of letting me loose, and the other one was solid. All right, and so I grabbed. They tell you if you're in trouble on your crutches, just allow yourself to fall. That's what they tell you, right? I didn't do that. And I grabbed my crutches and I squeezed them, and I thought, I'm not falling down. And I wrenched both my shoulders.
Oh, no.
And I really wrenched both my shoulders. So now I'm on my crutches and I have 2 wrenched shoulders. It was not a tea party, I'll tell you. It was a tough time. So anyway, my point is, I think people are very much more, people don't hold doors. You guys do, but people don't hold doors for others. Please, thank you. If you go into a restaurant and you say, may I please? True story. I had Joe and his sisters out for, we had gone out to lunch, and they were as children very, very polite kids, still are to this day, but they were very, very polite. And so when they were ordering their food, each one would say, may I please have, placing their order, may I please have. All 3 kids did the same thing, right? So that happened at, I think it was at Applebee's maybe, okay, that conversation. And why that is important is, so fast forward like a month and a half, 2 months later, we're at Red Robin, Grandma and the 3 kids, right? And as they are ready to place their order, may I please, may I please, may I please. The server says, oh my gosh, I remember this trio. And I was like, for a minute, I was afraid. Why do you remember? And what it was, she said, they were so polite. They were polite when they ordered their food, and they were polite when they got thank you, when the food was delivered to them. You're dealing with a lot of kids. You know, you see them in your neighborhoods. They are not necessarily, this is me being an old person, kids today are not necessarily, I hate to make kids today statements, but it's a kids today statement. Not all children today are being taught just simple acts of kindness, being polite, and it's refreshing when you do see children that are polite. So, and people today are the same way. So anyway, if I ever get my hands on that guy with the crutches, no.
Put him in crutches.
Yeah, right. I'll smack him.
What was your reaction to you passing your driving test?
Oh my gosh, heaven. Okay, heaven. I got my driver's license. Yes, my dad would never let me drive the car. So, I was glad I had my driver's license, but we did have an automatic. At the time, you had a choice between an automatic or a stick, and I was very grateful because I tried learning how to drive a stick, and it didn't go well. Let's just say it didn't go well at all. I never did learn. So, if either of you or any of you know how to drive stick, I'm impressed. But I mean, my gosh, now it's like somebody wanted to put something in my car, and I was like, wait, I have to give you the fob, you know, and she's like, oh, you don't have a key. And it's like, no, I have a fob.
All right. As we already spoke on, Milwaukee, since it evolved and since from the past, just to wrap it up, what were some things that you wish like would change in Milwaukee, or that you wish Milwaukee didn't do?
I don't want to say something inappropriate here, but I don't think we needed that trolley thing or whatever the heck that. Yeah, that thing is just, that's a.
Oh, the hop.
The hob,
Yep.
yeah. It's just like, what a waste of. Anyway, I think, I wish they did a better job of offering public transportation to areas of the city that really need public transportation, okay? I wish they hadn't canceled the buses to Summerfest and State Fair or wherever. Some things are changing for better, but I think some things still need work. But that stupid thing don't. So impressive that we have the Bucks Place. Oh my gosh. When they were building that, I thought that thing is ugly, but it's really a place to go to. So I'm impressed. So.
Well, thank you for letting us pry into your life for like an hour and 20.
Well, the time has flown. I enjoyed meeting you both. This has been
Nice
fun.
meeting you too.
Yeah, so thank you for doing this interview for our project, and yeah.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.